Geesh. Yéil. Wasach tu yake wujin chasati. Yéil. Ya Lingít stutul tu wujin. Tulla an tin kakusachan. Yéil konachach tu wasagu ya. Ya ha'at has. Ha hasani has. Has de kushkake ha yati. Ha inu has kawash atkin. Yéil ak. Konachawe. Ya tukane awakutsati. Du shishko has. Du gukyik de way ausene yatayach. Kawan kanins just chaye gugang. Aw ausha uch. Ja hast du gukyik de. Hast du toasagu has ausaku. Has kadutletzini. Ye awe ye kadutletzin. Ye kewe yak eti. A daily ye awe yak. Ya Lingít tu ye. Jawasa yachitiewe yekosti ach tuasagu. Ya kawe katibu Yéil. Yesh de katrata. Ye awe kagachta ak wujin. Wujin ayashtutul tu. When Geesh yak yeti de katuhan. Thank you folks for being here. It's wonderful to see everybody. This is a safe space. We're gonna just learn Lingít together with love and kindness. I heard it this way. There's a spirit inside of everything. That's why we give respect to all things. And so I bring these things up on a regular basis just because I've seen some things. I started studying Lingít in 1996 with my Geesh, my grandfather, Geesh Dennis Sr. And I've been studying ever since. And I've seen wonderful moments where someone, it was me, was getting emotional and I couldn't finish a sentence and was trying to sort of figure out how to smash it all together. And there were elders there who were finishing my sentences because they knew what I was trying to say. And it was just really, it was like they're just throwing a little life ring to me. And it was wonderful. I've seen people yell at people and I make fun of people, and I've seen people be really hurtful. So because of that, like I really try to be conscious of establishing the space as a good place to be. There's this phrase, adeshi, it's a noun, and it means a safe harbor or a sheltered place. So like, let's say it was a long time ago and we're paddling in a canoe and the weather shifts on us. We might look for a yakdei or an adeshi, a place where we could hang out while the weather passes. And so it's a safe space, it's a sheltered space. The verb actually refers to watching over something or protecting something. And we want them, our ancestors, to be watching over us here. For some of us, learning a language is a difficult thing. Sometimes there's traumas involved, and sometimes there's other things. We might feel bad about certain things. And so we want to just sort of keep it positive and keep it moving and get the canoe back in the water, And so we'll talk every now and then just about learning strategies. But I just wanted to share some things as we get started. So I guess I'll ask the group, anybody have any language that you'd like to share at the beginning? Anything at all? Maybe not.
Rhonda, do Geesh. Gewu ayachet. Gas gekwan chenach Ronda Farrar. Ayach sayi. Daklwedi nachatziti. Since the last time I took a class, I was adopted by my friend Nahan and Kashtitik's family. So I now have a Tlingit name, Gewu. And Dr. Wadi, I'm really happy. I know that I had probably shed a tear telling you, Chene, when you were in Seattle in the class that I really wanted to have a name before I died. But then I came to a realization my mother and father had actually given me the name Yuklan, which was a Chinese Chanwan name. So I resigned myself. I was happy with that. That was enough. And then what happens a year later? Then I get adopted and given a name. So, ach, was a good.
Ja, ach, klick, och, is het hier, je dat dat away. Ja, ach, klaar, du is, dat klaar, dich was het hier. Je dat chana, je gaat, je kan cheese, klick. Qewu, okay, sa. Qewu is a good name. It's a really neat because it could be a spider web, and it could be net, and it comes from this word qey, which means like between the folds of two things. And you see it all over the place in the word for bay, which is usually the word for the crook of your arm is jiqay. The woo part is like to be at, so qewu is at the folds of something, or kind of really, really great.
Yeah, quite an honor.
Geesh. And I see a hand up, Sasha. Quachintish.
Howdy. I had a question like about pronouncing the sound. It's the X with just one apostrophe after it, so like the pinched X. I've like when I've been trying to kind of figure it out on my own and with the See Alaska app, I kind of found it was easier. Like I could pronounce it better if I kept my tongue like well salivated, like made sure it was extra wet. Do you use that technique as well?
Yeah, for that one and the L with the apostrophe after, you gotta have a lot of, you just gotta have a lot of spit on your tongue. And so in these times, you want to make sure you're keeping at least a 6 foot distance from someone when you're talking to them in Tlingit, because stuff is, they're called ejectives, and sometimes they should be called projectile, I think, just because things emerge. So the X without the underline, that sound sounds like a couple of things that we can sort of think of in terms of sound effects. One is the wind. So if you just want to make a sound like the wind, you go, and that's that X sound. Also a jet airplane. So Alaska Airlines was taken off, or Delta, if you fly Delta from Juneau, whatever. And then the third one that I've heard is a cappuccino machine. So all three of those, like, we can make those sounds, but like if English is the language we've mostly been speaking, we might not have been making that sound to communicate. So where it gets tricky is you're going to make that same sound without using your lungs. So that means you have to hold your breath and you have to use your neck and your neck muscles and your jaw and everything in there to push that air out and through to get that really hard scraping sound. So the X on its own is, and the X with the apostrophe is. So another colleague of mine, Dash Ginny, she said it's like you take the cappuccino machine and you just shut it off all of a sudden. So you go, and so, you know, that's one way to practice, is going from the X to the X apostrophe. And then I like to just walk around sometimes and just make it just cycle it through my mouth. So I'll take a big breath because you got to hold your breath, and I'll go. But you've got to have saliva there because it really helps that sound to just squish through. It's the exact same place that you make a K sound, but instead of the tongue coming up and basically closing, it leaves a little gap for that scrapey sound to come through. That's a good one.
The isn't that bad, but the is terrible. I cannot manage to the L with the apostrophe, the is terrible. It's really hard to distinguish that from
Yeah, so your sets of L's, so basically you're gonna have an L with an apostrophe, a TL, and a TL with an apostrophe. I think especially you get to the L apostrophe and TL apostrophe, and it can get real tricky to tell the difference between those two. So basically the L on its own, there's no voiced L's in Lingít. So if you catch yourself going, oh, then you're making a little mistake, and we're gonna just fine tune that and just turn those vocal cords off. Every single L in the language, basically you're gonna take the tip of your tongue and bring it up as if you're gonna make that voiced L sound, like in the English word lake.
Okay.
So you try to say lake, and you put the tip of your tongue up behind your teeth. And English, you got to have like a lot of tension in your face because English is a lot on the lips, right? That's why you have lip readers in English. You can't have a lip reader in Tlingit because you never close your lips. You just be sitting there going, right? You just couldn't do it. And so, so what you're gonna do is you're gonna put the tip of your tongue up behind your teeth. You have to keep your cheeks very relaxed, and you blow out the sides, and you end up with so that is just right out the sides. And this is the first letter in the word Lingít, which is why, you know, folks come here from other places and they're saying, who are you? And eventually we figure out what they're asking. So we'd say Lingít, and they'd say Klinkit, like Lingít, Tlingit, like Lingít. And so that's why it's spelled with a T, pronounced with a K. But when we're speaking this language, we should be saying Lingít. So that's the L, right? And you see it all over the place. You're also going to run into things where like that L goes right into another consonant. Like this one word, L, D, A, K, high toned A, T, T, letter T. So that word is cut. So there's no vowel in between it. It's two consonants in a row. Tlingit will string 2, 3, 4 consonants in a row sometimes. You just gotta be ready for that, because sometimes you just want your brain's like, vowel? It's like want to buy a vowel. It's just like on Wheel of Fortune. Like just let me buy a vowel. And Tlingit's like, no vowel, just consonants, right? So that's that L sound. So yeah, and you're kind of doing a bit of a smile thing. So if you're going to make that sound without your lungs, what you end up doing is squishing your tongue. So your tongue goes up like that, but then the whole part of it squishes and pushes the sound out the sides. So that L sound goes out the sides of your mouth. So when you hold your breath and make that sound, you get so there's a coho. They're running right now. People are out there catching them around here. And that's L apostrophe O O K. So we pronounce that one ook. Ook. And that one that can be tricky. That's also, I think that's the one where if you're eating something, it's gonna just go all over somebody. So you just gotta be careful. was eating king crab one time. It just flew right by someone's ear. Like I wasn't looking at him right in the face. I must have been looking over their shoulders, or maybe I just had bad aim. I don't know. Well, it just flew right over their shoulder.
Oh, the and the will also eject whatever you're eating at the time.
Yeah, these things will happen. And I saw there was a hand up. Was that Doug? Did you have a thought?
Yeah, I was just curious. Do you? Someone commented about the DL and the TL and the TL apostrophe, and that's an aspiration difference, right, between the D and the T. So
Yeah.
does it ever voice when it's next to something voiced?
It comes pretty close in the DL. So in the DL,
The DL.
Jla. So it bleeds over a little bit, but it's
Ja.
not full on voiced L.
Okay.
J plus sh gets you Jla. So it's kind of close.
But does the D itself, is the D itself voiced, or is it just unaspirated?
So the D and the T are the same letter, except you're adding your vocal cords. So you go t, 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 d, 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 t,
Okay.
d. And it's important to remember because a T will change to a D sometimes.
As I recall, in the canonical Alaskan forms, it is an aspiration difference, but like for the unaspirated sound, anything from a voiced sound to an unaspirated sound will probably do. The aspirated one is the one that's marked, and it's really aspirated.
Okay. So the TL sound, so you're gonna make a T sound, t, 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 and then this L sound, sh, sh, sh. So you get so that T is pretty fast and it just runs right into that L sound, right? So if you're gonna say no, you're gonna say click, and if you're gonna say not, you're gonna say click. And so that's that TL sound. You say your mother, you're gonna say claw or akle, claw. So to make that sound, again, holding your breath. So when you squish that L apostrophe, it squishes out the side. Ook. Ook. But the TL comes out this way. And this one, it's a bit of a, the whole tongue comes up and blocks the air for a second and then folds over and gives out that sound. So for like if you're gonna say trash, so these are ones, there are some sets of sounds that do get tricky for making them. And I saw someone had noted the underlined G is another tough one. One of the comparisons I really like is someone said it's like you're pretending to drink water. If you're gonna go boop, 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 like that's the sound that you're making. So good questions. Let me just check in real quick. Did anybody not have a chance yesterday to just tell us who you are? We did very brief introductions. We just said our name. Some people shared just a couple quick things about where they're at and learning Lingít. But if you want to share anything with us, who you are, it'd be nice to hear. We don't have to do everybody. If you went last night, don't go again. It's wonderful to hear. But just for folks who haven't said hello yet, I see a hand up. Is that Renee?
Yes, thank you. My name is Renee Perry, and I am Raven Moji and Frog Clan from Sitka. My family is from Sitka and Juneau, and I live in Portland. I have studied a little bit. I was in Seattle a couple of years ago with Nahan and others, and so I'm familiar with some words. and I can do a couple of pieces of introduction. I'm a little rusty. And yeah, I'm hoping to this next year really dive in. I'm finishing my master's at Oregon State and have a foreign language requirement, but am encouraged to do Indigenous language. So I'm hoping to really engage and get better.
Okay. Geesh.
Gunashish.
Let's see. I see some other hands up. I see Sienna.
Hi, I'm Sienna, and I'm Muriel. We're sisters. We're both Kiksadi from Sitka, born and raised. I only know a couple words, but I'm really excited to learn. And she'll be taking a class at UAS in the fall, so getting a little head start on that. Gunashish.
Yep.
Gunashish.
Geesh. And Megan.
Hi, my name's Megan. I work with JAM. I work at Glacier Valley, and we are going to be working on incorporating Tlingit into our violin classroom. We're piloting a program, Hatu Yéil. I've been very blessed to have some great helpers, teachers, speakers, Hune and Nilitoa and Kuliek and some others. And so thanks for inviting me, and I'm glad I get to do this and practicing, especially my commands is my goal, is to be good at those by the end of this week.
Okay. Geesh. And Yacht.
Yake Hana Shidakat Yuhan, Yake Yuch Satini, Lingít Kainach, Yacht Yuchat Duasak, Leikak Kainach, Peter Stanton Yuchat Duasak, Kichhank Ye Hat Yati, Ku at Shatuch Hatsati. So good evening, everybody. It's great to see all of you. I'm a teacher in Ketchikan, and sorry I couldn't make it yesterday, but I'm happy to be here. Gunashish.
Okay. Geesh. And Kleishu Tla.
My Tlingit name is Kleku Claw. That name was given to me by Dr. Maria Shaw Claw Williams. I spent the fall and spring semesters studying with Kuhiek Rabbi Littlefield, and I have decided I'm going to dedicate myself to learning the Tlingit language. It's not the language of my people. My people are Nupaq, our language is a Nupaqtun, but I was told by an elder that said, our people were not stupid, and he meant Alaska Native people. He said, we knew how to speak each other's languages. We were multilingual. We had to be to trade and survive and for war and so on. And he told me, learn any language you can, because we are a smart people. And when it's time for you to learn your language, you will. And this is what has been available. And I loved my teacher, Kolhiek, and I am excited to learn from you and to challenge myself and keep growing. So Gunach Cheesh for having me.
Okay. Geesh. And Bess.
Bess, you hut to Sauk, and I live in Juneau. And I work with kids for a nonprofit, and we take them outside and on hikes. And so I'm working on my Tlingit to help my own connection with this place, but also with the kids as well. Gunashish.
Geesh. Satini. And is that Tori? Is that right?
I am not that great with my computer. It turns out. Sorry, I was not here yesterday. I'm excited about the class. I'm Tori Curran. I have lived in Sitka for about 40 years, and it's well past time that I learned the Tlingit language. I took a class from Robbie Littlefield last year, and I was humbled to receive a name from Louise Brady Kiksadi at the herring ceremony last year, and I have a difficult time pronouncing it. Ushnahani, I don't have it right, but basically has to do with wind and the windy point where the frog people lived. I was humbled by that, and I thought, okay, I got stalled after Robbie's class because I'm not very good at languages, and it's difficult, the pronunciation. And I thought, well, you just can't give up yet. So I'm moving forward with this, and I'm grateful for this opportunity.
Okay. Geesh and Margaret Katzik.
Gannach Geesh saach you chet duasak ach ish has shangu kedi ach Liku has dachlawedi gannach Geesh ach klach liku has ana ut jilkat kwan yai hit dach gannach Geesh. My Tlingit name is Saach. My English name is Margaret Ketzik. My father's people are the Shangu Kadi. The late David George Ketzik Kingiste. My mother is Aleut from St. George Island, I believe. My clan Ganach Tedi comes from Klekwan area. Very beginner status, and just glad to be here. Ganach Geesh.
Okay. Geesh, Hati Guti. And Ruth.
I welcome your, if you'd like to jump in at any time in my introduction. So I would love that if you would jump in if there's something you could improve on my pronunciation. Kach tu ayahad tle ka Nak Ruth Jensen, you had duasak. Tia Nadi, Nak hat city, til hit, ayaha nakahidi. Yen yanyedi, yadi hat city, Nastedi ayahat dua dakanuh you chikan kwan dak ayahat kichkan ye hat kudzati Gresham Oregon ye hat sit ya ye hat yati Goodness Geesh.
Yukecha, Goodness Geesh. Okay. And Yéil Kagu.
Yéil Kagu, you chat do a sock. Lingít chena, Gleit ka chenach kemel aya ach saye dizante kahinik chatsati. There we.
Okay. Goodness, geesh. And Andres, did I see your hand go?
Andres Camacho, Yuhat Duasak. A few years ago, Al Martin shared the name Junik Nahik with me, and Marie Olson was there, and she looked over at me and she said that I had a lot of responsibility now. And so it's this year I was finally able to start learning Lingít, which has been really incredible. Although this summer, while I was fishing, I have forgotten a lot, but I was looking for berries the other day, and I came across red huckleberries for the first time. And the first word that popped into my head was tlekatunk, and that made me really happy. So really happy to be here with all of you and to meet fellow learners.
We were at Mount Edgecombe, in the basement of Mount Edgecombe. We had a language immersion probably 5-6 years ago. Must have been 5 years ago, because my youngest, he's 6 now, and he was just 1, I think. And boy, we were having a blast there. We were just having a lot of fun. And I had this idea because I saw this language activity in Hawaii shortly before that, where they took like this incredible Hawaiian legend and they broke it up into pieces, and they worked in teams to reenact it all in Hawaiian. And they sat these big kumunui, they're big teachers, and they're big elders, like heavy hitters, sat them down in the front, and they were the judges. And the winners were the ones who made them laugh the most. And it was so fun because like sometimes when it comes to our stories and sometimes our language, and we get so serious sometimes, and it is something we need to respect and honor, but sometimes we get so serious, like we don't even laugh at the funny ones, because some of those Raven stories are really funny, and you like tell them to people and they act like, you're reading from the Bible or something, because you don't usually laugh at those things. And so we had this idea that we would break up this Raven story. It's called Yéil, and it's Raven and Blueberries. It was told by Anyasha Hash to us, Sam Johnston. And in the story, basically, he takes his eyes out because he doesn't like to be watched when he's eating. And maybe we'll listen to the story right after this. And he puts his eyes down so that he says, "You let me know if there's a boat coming. I'm going to go eat these blueberries." And he eats these blueberries. And so she was supposed to be his eyeball. And so they were very clever. They put a chair, and then she was sitting there on the chair, so you just see her head. And then she would yell, "Yauk Yanakuch, Yauk Yanakuch." This was in Sitka, and she was really shy, I think, and so she got really embarrassed when it was her turn to yell the line, and she said, "Yauk Yanakuch." She did great, but she would turn so red, her face turned so red. So then we're teasing her about being kekatunk instead of kanata. So it made me think of that. It was fun. Let's see. Strawberries are shak. I don't think there's a name for blackberries, so I just call them tuch. Raspberries are kek yadi, and blueberries depends. Kanata are really actually the blue huckleberries, and then katach, I think, is the name of the powdery blue ones. We'll have to check. Okay, Geesh. And let's see, anybody else want to say hello? Maybe I'll cue up this story. Okay, Pauline.
Good evening. I'm in Philadelphia, quite far away, and I'm Pauline Saribas. My Tlingit name is Tsitzkar Yegi, given to me by Chone Lance Twitchell upon my adoption by Chad Titel into the Raven Ganach Tedi Ishkahit of Kuklan. My father was Conrad Nunley. He was invited into the folds of the Kagwantan by Herman Kika Sr. And I love to learn to speak Tlingit. However, I learn best by singing and music. So that's And I'm hoping to come to Sitka soon if I get a Phillips Fund extension on my original grant from the American Philosophical Society. So I'll hopefully see everybody there.
Yeah, what?
Geesh.
Okay. Anybody else want to say hello? Claire.
Hi, I'm Claire Sanchez. I use she, her pronouns. I'm in Sitka and I'm currently working for Outer Coast. So I'm very grateful to be here. And I don't really know any Tlingit, so I'm excited to learn. Thank you for having me. Geesh.
Okay, Geesh. Anybody else? John.
Hi, I'm in Minnesota, which is not as far away as some of these other folks, but it still feels late when you got a young kid. I know 1 or 2 words, and I'm super excited about this space and to learn more. So thank you. Geesh.
Okay, Geesh. Yeah, and thanks for hanging tough, you folks in future time zones. So I know, like, sometimes just smashing a bunch of Tlingit for 2 hours at 10 at night can be pretty wild. And it's probably hot there. I don't know. But Geesh for hanging tough. And just so that we're all aware, nobody has to apologize for anything going on in your home. If there's noise when you talk or you got kids, like I'll probably have kids coming trying to negotiate more video game time. We're coming up on well over 1.5 years in various states of pandemic and quarantine and whatever. So I was happy we could be together. So nobody has to worry about anything. It's interesting to Zoom together and to have these little windows into each other's lives. But for me, it's just about connecting through the language, no matter where you are, no matter what your journey is that got you here. That's what Kehinak, John Martin told me. He says they already prepared the path for us. And so I find comfort in stuff like that, because sometimes I used to think, well, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do now? What about now? And really, it's like, buckle down, learn the language, use it. Like that's a huge part of it. If you want to be part of this Tlingit language revitalization, then it's wonderful. It's wonderful to have people be a part of it. And yeah, and I liked the seasonal discussions about all the berries popping up, and what's they might be gone by now. Those are hitting. Those go real fast. The thimbleberries, you gotta be quick to get those ones. Those are not too common around here. I'm sure there's patches of Nagoon. With the border closed, I'll just have to put this out there. My Hockey supply is getting low. So send help. So I don't have a version of Yéil and Kanata with the subtitles on it. So we'll get that queued up for tomorrow. But I thought maybe before we take a break, I'll share a little story with you folks. I'll say it in Tlingit and then I'll translate it. We Yéil shkashni ko adati jechwanein. Kanachoe kachwan ish kashakshani teen. Chagkaku has the eight air kautusha hit katuanik. Glet kak enach. The Yéil shkashnik kayel kutlak. Has the eight hayach or achyata. Sekayke ka kuchain ka naketlan. Ye awe one kanins. Asaya kutzati yeshkashnik. Geesh Daax Woogoodi Yéil. Ye awe yidu asak yeshkashnik. Ye Yéil at Woogood nij. We gao. Kech yan wuchai chaya we. Keys. Katech daku daij. Like. We gao. Just kliye wuti we keys. Yéil kawasa de tuasagu. We out the needs away de tuasagu. Kanachawe our chai. Achawe a kawa akawe Geesh Daax Woogoodi. Ye awe a kawa ak we hin tate awe Woogoodi Geesh. Kachaya wa dako a. Dukasegu aya. Achawe dukasegu kutsiti. Kinde awe au shatak. Nichaya nich Woogood ka au satino e nukshian. Yéil khani khatishi. Hinta de kakakikak. Nis aya kwashak yakitlako ach jeez. Wasach to us a good needs. When nukshayan konacho au shagug. Hinta deo wukago. Hinta deo wukak. Aka awe kinde awe. Digitawati away when knees, Yéil konacho out the needs. Wasatu tu ke. Wana knees away, aya de hantu a good way. Keys kach out, keys kach out the new gusha nak. Ho owe ganda awe wuta. The dikikaye wuti away ta. Ye away. Kashitosh goose say what ati. We Yéil koa. We shanak. Kakan, we gun. Ak away with the hun, Yéil. Hokoa. Klitli Yéil. Anach soeach shkatayai hani. Kone khatya sewa at. Yéil. Ya out the knees, ayawe knees hini konachoe khatsewa at. Ach tu was a go. Khatout let aye we gun. Itli Yéil, itli. We Yéil. Oh, aus a coup. Ya keys kach she out the new gusha nuk. Ya keys away. I was shot. A joy de tuasa goo. Well, the katri nichka at the aus a teeny. A joy. Chew the good. We shanuk. Ken the tuka no way aus a nuke. Did you knees nuku. Knees nuku. Kone aya de tukta aya a kawa gwash. Kanachaya kawa gwash. Knees nuku team. We shanuk. Itli day. Ach to us a keys away, duck. Keys duck. Itli day. To tukta away a kawa gwash. Kwati. Wake out. Gee, we're not away, please. Yéil you ayach away aus the name. Gadane away and aus the nuke. Aus the teen away, wake out. Kone aya yan wusha. Akadak uada. Wekies. Konachawe do to us a go. Just the cut ku. Christy day no at Hawe Hasayaw Tlaki. A joy aus the name. We shall knock. Ye we skashni puts a tea. Has we duck den tan, has away hain, Geesh Daax Woogoodi Yéil. Kudasa puts a tea a kaye wooty. Yashkashnika puts a tea so. A itch achakuta skashniki a de Woogood. Ya yidat kakwanik lil kakenach wash. Achu ayi to us a go. Has the inka chaniki lil kakenach. So there's the story. Anybody want to start the translation? I'll do it if nobody wants to. I thought I'd just see if anybody wanted to translate it or parts of it, anyways. I should have warned you. But there's no worries if nobody wants to.
It's a long story.
Yeah, there you
You
go.
should have done it in parts.
Next
I
time.
would have jumped in on the parts. Like
The raven
at a
ate the
time.
berries. The raven flew. The raven.
Okay.
The
How are
raven and
you?
the mink and the sea urchin.
Yeah.
Yeah, all those things are in there.
On the beach. On the beach.
Yeah, well, yeah, okay.
But one of the things is maybe in the chat you could put the for later maybe so that we could, that you said that there wasn't the translated version, maybe you could put it in there and some of us could just practice translating.
Yeah, or next time, yeah, we could do,
Yeah.
I'll go a little slower and see if folks want to just put it in the chat what they're hearing. So there's lots of Raven. I used to work on Raven stories with, well, I did it first with Nora, and then I worked with Marge Dutson and George Davis, and we worked on a whole bunch of them from a whole bunch of speakers. And this particular story, I had heard from Seqeqe, Emma Marks, and also from Kuchain, Frank Italio, and Nakishan, Frank Dick. Those are the three versions. Probably also Shah Daax, Robert Zuboff. And it's called Geesh Daax Woogoodi Yéil, which would be Raven walked down the bull kelp or walked among the bull kelp. There's different ways you could translate that. So Geesh is bull kelp. Daax is kind of around and moving. And then Woogoodi Yéil is the walking raven. And so Raven was walking on the beach and he really wanted some sea urchins. So he thought he would walk down the bull kelp to get to the bottom. But no matter how hard he tried, he would just pop right up at the top because he's got air inside of him. So he got kind of frustrated. He went back to the beach and then he saw a mink, Nukshiyan. And he said, "Hey, in-law, can you swim to the bottom? Could you maybe get me a sea urchin so I could eat it?" So audanis is a verb for eating sea urchins right out of the shell. And no cooking or anything like these. Slurp it right out. And so the mink's really good at swimming down and getting them. So he goes out and he gets one for him, brings it back, and Raven just gobbles it right up. Then at some point he goes and he finds this elder. And these stories are cool because some people got like really complicated names. And so when you hear different storytellers, they just keep saying these great big names. Like there's one that's like the little elder who never worried about anything. And this one is the little elder who sat on the tide. So he goes and finds this little elder and they like to sleep by the fire and they got a board right on their back. And that board and the fire kind of really keep them warm. So he stands in between this little elder and the fire and that little elder gets upset. And there's one version, it's probably by Kuchain. He's really laughing. He says, Raven's mother never named him. He never had a name. It was this little elder who named him. But when she named him, she called him Yéil, which is a doo-doo butt raven. And so that's what she called him. She said, Yéil. So she says, "You doo-doo butt raven, why are you standing between me and the fire? Or why are you standing in front of me?" Because, you know, she's like the elder like to just really stay warm. And Raven says, "Well, I ate that sea urchin and the water from the sea urchin really made me cold. So I was trying to warm up by the fire." And that little elder got really mad. But Raven also knew that this little elder was holding on to the tide. And that's at that time, the tide didn't go out, didn't come back. It has always stayed high. And so he had no tide at that time. So Raven attacked this little elder and spun them upside down and he had that empty sea urchin shell with the pokies on it, and he starts banging all around this elder's butt, and the elder's yelling, Yéil, don't, Raven, don't. And he says, you're gonna let go of that tide, let go of that tide, just let go of that tide. And he's banging the sea urchin shell, and then so finally the little elder says, okay, I'll let it go, and let go of the tide. And because of that, the tide goes out and it comes back now. And Raven, even though it's usually he wants something, and that's why he does these things. But then there's a lot of times where he wants all the people. And he always thinks that they usually talk about the poor people. He's always thinking about the poor people. He says, I just want the people to be able to eat this food. And so there's a lot of folks that say like, they say like when the tide goes out, it's like the table is ready, table is set, because there's so much food. All these different, so clams and cockles and goose tongue and beach asparagus, all these different foods, sea urchin, knees, are there for people to gather. But it's because Raven did that thing. And so it was fun because King Geesh, he went into his school. I remember he was telling that story, and I was there. I was like, what's he gonna do about the hitting this elder all over their butt with a sea urchin shell? Because that's how the story goes. And there's also the Yéil part, and so like those are just in the story. And we adjust our stories sometimes, And so in the story, he tickled the elder until the elder let go. I was like, oh, that's a cute way to handle it. Because sometimes you can't just go full Raven. And so, yeah, so the Yéil part, it's pretty literally having crap on your, it's being crappy. And so, Nora, she would just go right to the SH word when she would she would just laugh too, and so, yeah. And, it's fun. I told that story to my kids, and I don't usually tell them the adjusted versions. I just tell it to, but, a school's different because some parents going to end up complaining. They're like, maybe someday, I guess, at the Lingít immersion school, we'll just go full on in the stories, but there's other stories too, where like this little bird plucks out people's eyeballs and stuff, and they're just stuck there and blood in their eyes and they can't move or anything. It's kind of scary. I remember I was telling my kid this, and she was like 3, I think, and I started telling her the story, and I stopped. I was like, I speak Lingít to my kids, I understand Lingít, and I said, this story is too scary, I don't want to tell you. And she said, just tell me. So I told her the whole story, and then we got done, and she's like, what was the scary part? I was like, the eyes, the blood in the eyes. And then she told her mom. I got in trouble. But anyways, the stories are really fun, and even like I know them and I could tell them. I'm still telling like simplified versions of those stories. So this MOOC is brought to you by Outer Coast. So you should check out Outer Coast. You should support what they're doing. You should send them thank you notes because they fund this. And I want to talk about the MOOC for a second, because this MOOC idea goes back to John Pugh, who was Chancellor of UAS when I first got there in 2011. And it was probably 2014 or something. He pulled me in his office and he said, you hear about this MOOC thing? I was like, I don't know what a MOOC is. It's like a massive online open classroom. He says, where people could just learn. They don't even have to pay. He says, we should do that for Lingít. We should figure out how to do that. And so we've been working on that. There's been teams of people working on that just to make sure that there's free open access to language learning, and that folks can be here. And so I'm really thankful. Last year, Sea Alaska Heritage Institute co-sponsored the MOOC, and then Central Council Tlingit and Haida, they also sponsored a MOOC just so that folks could have a place to learn and practice the language. So I want to acknowledge those things before we take our break. And I think after the break, I'm going to show you folks how to find a bunch of resources, how to access some things, recordings of elders, including ones that have subtitles, and so that you can look at the transcription and translation as it goes along. Any thoughts before we take our break? Anything you guys want to share or questions? Oh, that's a good question.
How do you spell that? Like Yéil, the stink butt raven.
TL apostrophe high toned EE TL apostrophe I, which is really interesting because it.
Can you put it in the chat, Lance, or have someone do it?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry I did, but I sent it as a direct message just because.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't see it.
I only sent it to one person. That's.
Yeah, I want to use that one for my daughters.
And it comes from, we're getting right to it. So if you go L apostrophe high toned I L apostrophe, that is the literal word for poop. And this is also, it's a verb root, right? Just really getting down, day 2 of the MOOC, right? Just really getting down to the crap here. So it is, so just like in English, like there's some different ways to say like doo-doo and crap and poop, and then you get into shit and other stuff like that. So let me, before we take our break, I'll teach you some essentials here. So there's this phrase, Gandhi Nagudi. That's the nicest, I don't know, that's the most indirect way to say poop. And it means the going outside is really what it kind of means. So Gandhi Nagudi. And let me tell you something. Here's a cultural component. If you're out in the woods, don't say the name of a bear, either in English or in Tlingit. That's just good common practice. Because in Tlingit, like if you say that thing's name, that's the big thing of the forest. That's the thing we respect the most. That's the thing we talk to before we even go into the forest. So if you start walking around, hoots, 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 brown bear, like it's gonna come. So it'd be like, yes, talking about me, here I am. So when you see that thing's poop, you should call it Gandhi Nagudi. So because that's being very respectful too. I don't know. It's really interesting. There's another word which is hot, which really means like a mess. It's something's mess. So that's the sort of one step towards being more direct about what we're talking about. And then we get into and that's, oops, I spelled that. And that's really getting down to it. And that's the one where there's a verb for that one. That one's not in the dictionary. It's not in the older dictionaries. It's in the newer dictionaries. It was something that that was not really documented. So we'll look at some resources after the break, but one of them was put together by folks who I think maybe, I don't know if it's just embarrassment or they were missionaries, so it could be some sanitizing going on of the language. But it's got like all these verbs and it's wonderful, but it doesn't tell you how to, you can't poop, you can't pee, you can't fart, you can't burp, maybe burping's in there. And you also can't make more people, like there's certainly a whole vocabulary for all of that. And that's all part of a whole language. So we'll look at the other stuff too, but Hutsnu, so that's, we'll talk about this too, like when Tlingit takes, it does this all the time. It'll take multiple words and smush them into one word. It's called like to compound a noun. So hoots is a brown bear, and then nu is a fort. So when you want to put them together, you end up with huts nu wu, the brown bear fort. And then there's different ways that you can translate that. You could say brown, you wouldn't really say brown bear's fort, like that fort belongs to the brown bear, because you really wouldn't have a compound if that happened. But when you have a compound, you could either say, some people translate as fortress of the bear, which I think works well, or brown bear fort. So sort of like when you name places in English, if you're going to call something Eagle River, you're not saying Eagles River, right? And so a similar thing happens in Lingít, and it happens a lot with place names. It's good questions. Yeah, so you can donate to Outer Coast. You can help keep these initiatives going. It's a 2-year college program and also a college preparation program. And it's really exciting, the stuff that they're doing there in Sitka. I think it's worth checking out, supporting. If you want to keep learning Lingít, the University of Alaska Southeast, we're teaching Lingít every single semester. We've got 3 different levels, beginning, intermediate, and advanced. Would love to see you there. There's 4 credit options, which means you're getting college credit, and it's a bit more expensive. And then there's 0 credit options, which is a lot cheaper, and so you can give a little bit to help us sort of keep going. And then there's a whole bunch of scholarship opportunities. Like, I think now more than ever, if somebody wanted to just full on learn Lingít, there's a lot of opportunities out there for folks through PETA's and Sea Alaska Heritage Institute. There's probably more opportunities for people who are ethnically Lingít, but it's our language, and it was taken from us, and now we are reclaiming it, but also sharing that language with an awful lot of other folks, and it should be used, and it should be on the land. We should be hearing it, seeing it, using it. I remember I used to go to Safeway here in Juneau, and I always would look for this one person. I would always stand in their line because they spoke Lingít, and I could get my groceries in Lingít. It was really, really fun. Taja, do you have a thought or a question?
I have a question actually about the UAS classes. So for folks who are not located in Southeast, what's the difference between offerings at Sitka's campus or Juneau's campus, and why would we want to sign up for one versus another?
Yeah, we've got wonderful teachers in Sitka, and we also have wonderful teachers in Juneau. So it kind of, whichever one you would like to sign up for. If we get into intermediate and advanced, it kind of all goes to Juneau at that point. Yeah, and then every class that we teach, there's usually an in-person and a distance, so you're in the same space. And this last year everything was distance, but we're going back to in the classroom, so we'll see how it all goes. There's probably more variants coming, but keep our fingers crossed. Kasank.
Geesh. So I heard the question about the hoots no woo just a little differently, and I wanted to speak on that because I spend a lot of time in the woods, and I have like a really deep relationship with a lot of the animals, and my relationship, for me personally, it shows because they let me get a lot closer to them. When I have interactions with them, they often allow me to be a lot more direct than maybe other people will be. But it's like this relationship that I work on. And I give a lot of respect. I've been to the Coot River where my family property is at. And every time we go in there, I make a lot of noise. I pray. And the bears sometimes the bears and the mother bears there with their cubs, and she will go over to the other side of the river to let me and my children be in that spot. So, it's just a real respectful relationship that I have with them. So like, the hoots and woo thing, the way I think about that, and I'm not trying to speak for those people. I am related directly through the Bear Clan in Haines because my great grandmother lost her original husband and married somebody in the Bear Clan. So I'm kind of both in that way. So I have a real deep relationship with them. I've really worked with it a long time. So, you know, I don't say that word like you said when I'm going into the forest, but I do think about being respectful when I do. And if I do utter the word, it's to speak to them, you know. But again, this is a personal relationship that I developed for a very long time. I've noticed that some people can't talk to the bears and have them listen. And there are many times that they'll just stop and kind of look up and listen to me when I'm speaking to them. I'm often trying to use as much Tlingit as I can too. So, you know, I think just to add to Hune is try to be as respectful you can when you engage and interact with the animals of the forest, because they have their own lives, and if you spend enough time with them, they actually have their own social systems and laws, and they interact with us, but they expect the same amount of respect that we give them. So, and they give it to us. So just wanted to add that. Geesh.
Yeah, and so we would talk to them. Kuchiek put in the chat Yahtzee Nate. That's an alternative name for a brown bear. That one's pretty safe to. It just means a living thing. And so this is something, a trait that we share with some of our other Na-Dene relatives who have a similar thing where they just don't talk about that thing when they're out in the woods. And I think for inland Tlingit, sometimes it's a bit stronger than coastal Tlingit, just in terms of like that particular tradition. There was one elder that I really love to work with. His name is Kaklike, and we had this little cartoon, and these little animals having a party, and one of them was a bear. And he looked at it, he says, "I'm not gonna do that." I said, "What? That's that. What's that in the name?" He says, "You change that one. Make a dog, make it whatever you want. If that's a bear, I'm not gonna do it." So he wouldn't even do a cartoon thing if there was a bear in it. And so it's really just neat to sort of think about these ways of being and think about these cultural things. A few things about being out on the land. It's a wonderful place to use the language. If you really, you know, in the classroom, you just grind it out and get a bunch of stuff, practice a bunch of things, talk about a bunch of concepts, but you got to get out on the land and use the language, because that's how it's gonna. This one elder, he was Gwich'in, his name was Randall Tetlichi, came to hang out with us, and he said, you guys are probably getting really upset because a lot of your elders are passing away and you feel like their knowledge is probably going with them. He says, but it doesn't leave. He says, it goes back in the land, and you go out on the land and you speak your language, and then knowledge comes to you in your dreams. And that was such an amazing thing to hear. And so, but while you're out there using the language too, couple things is don't laugh at animals, don't point at them, don't say rude things about them, like them being ugly or anything like that, sounding terrible. I've got, you know, we got a whole bunch of stories where things just really get out of control. But then we got other stories too. Joe Hotch, he said, without your language, your life is going to spin out of control. And, you know, these are just things to keep in mind. And as we sort of keep thinking about there's a whole cultural underpinning to learning Tlingit and to using it here. And that's what some of these things are that we're touching on.
Pune, is Yahtzee just for non-human animals, or could you use it for a human too?
It's just a brown bear. It's just an alternative.
Just specifically a brown bear. Okay. Good night.
If you're out in the woods and you don't want to say hoots, you say Yahtzee Nate. And yeah, some people, they claim the brown bear, so Techoidi, Chukanidi, Kagwanton. And so sometimes those clans will actually have a closer relationship to that particular animal. And everything out there understands Tlingit. And so I've talked to porcupine, I've talked to deer, I've talked to all kinds of things out there. I've talked to bears. I got one to just leave our fish alone by finally remembering to just speak to it in Tlingit. and it works, you know, and it's really interesting stuff too, like some of the things that the language will reveal and that it'll show you, and it's something that's been here for 15,000 years. We've been sitting here speaking the language, and it's not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. So, but geesh, let's take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we're gonna take a look at a few more phrases from elders, and then we did a little bit of sound stuff, so maybe we'll do some, just show you like some of the basics of looking up stuff and some important resources, and we'll talk about verbs a little bit. Okay, see you in 5. Okay. Geesh. Great things being shared in the chat. So let me put my university email address in here. So if you folks have questions about Tlingit language classes that are offered at UAS, whether it's signing up or scholarships or whatever, please let me know. And keep an eye out for, if you're on Facebook or Twitter, I'm sure folks will be sending stuff out soon as we start to approach the fall semester. We just always like to try and get as many people in as we can and just keep the language communities growing. I'll also share some stuff, invitation to some software called Basecamp that we started using in the spring, which is basically a way for us to communicate with each other through message boards and also through chats so that we could set up study groups. There's one Zoom link that's dedicated for study groups. So basically I'll set up Zoom links for the classes that we run. Then there's a separate Zoom link for study groups that want to get together. And then, yeah, so there is audio for some of the beginning Tlingit. The Downhauer beginning Tlingit workbook features Qunak, Fred White, and Qeuchne, Nora Downhauer. And let's just take a second here and talk about some resources. So I will share a screen with you folks and ask questions if you got them. Let me zoom in here a little bit. So for maybe 6 or 7 years now, I've been running this blog, and it's just a place to just really store things. So you can read about the Tlingit language, some stuff about learning it, and then just some basic information about Tlingit. For learning Tlingit, like, so here's all the types of courses that I've taught. So if you go to Tlingit MOOC, that's what we're doing here. So again, that was under the tab Learning Tlingit, and then the sub-tab Tlingit MOOC. So if it's got some information about just generally what we're trying to do, some guidelines, being kind to each other, not practicing discrimination of any kind, trying not to correct people unless they ask for it, keeping a safe space, and encouraging everybody to try. We also, here's kind of a whole bunch of resources all in one spot. So if you're newer to Tlingit, so here's the beginning Tlingit workbook. All the edits should be done in the next 3 weeks, and then there'll be a final version that will be ready for print, finally. And then there's a Tlingit dictionary, there's the Tlingit verb dictionary, and then a book called Tlingit Chinachsa, which is a collection of phrases, which is incredibly useful. And then there's a Tlingit Verb Database, which is by Carrie Eggleston, and it's fantastic. If you want to get into the intermediate stuff, so we have Hausane Chayu Katangi, which is a grammar for Tlingit. So it kind of explains all the major parts of the language. There's a Tlingit reference guide, which is a quick guidebook for looking up verbs, and I'll show you folks that. There's a couple of books here that are just wonderful translations and transcriptions by the Downhauers. And then if you're advanced, there's the Tlingit stem list and verb notes by Jeff Lear, then the verbal structure handbook by James Crippen. Zeush is his Tlingit name. And then I'll be posting the recordings of our classes here. So this is how you could watch the class if you had to step out, if you missed a class, if you wanted to review something. So these classes I just record them, I just upload them right to YouTube, usually that evening. So you'll see the date here, what we covered. And if there's any sort of handout that we look at, I'll put a link to it right here so you can download it and have a copy of it with you. Let's see if I missed anything in the chat. Okay. And then going back, not all of these have audio. So there are ones, so usually we sort of go through this in beginning Tlingit, like if you're signed up with Kutlik, Robbie Littlefield, or Ida, Heather Burge, you folks will be going through the beginning Tlingit workbook in a class. You could also watch recorded beginning Tlingit classes. So like every class that I've taught for the past probably 6 years, maybe, I've recorded and I've also put on YouTube, and then you can watch them here. So you could go to Intermediate Tlingit and you could watch every class that we did last year. So it's a similar type of thing. Here's the resources, and then here's the link to the class, and then here's the classes as you go sort of through. So starting with April, that was our last one. Then you go April 15th, and I had a mustache then, it was nice. And so if folks want to learn, like that's one way to learn. And the link is right here. So if you couldn't pay tuition, you could still come. You know, nobody's gonna tell you to go unless you're causing a ruckus, then maybe we'll have a chat.
Oops.
Question? Done?
Oh, I didn't realize my mic was on.
Oh, okay.
I thought it was funny. I did have a question though. I did have a question. So with your learning materials, if you're creating your own study materials, like say videos, is it generally okay to use it and credit you in the video?
Yeah, so if you go to this curriculum folder, stuff takes a long time to load on here. So this is a Google folder, and this link right here has everything that I've ever collected on Tlingit, and it has most of the resources that I've used to, like if you want the images from the beginning Tlingit workbook, you could find them in here. Basically, if you clicked on there, it'll take you to a Google folder, lots of stuff in there. And let me zoom in again, maybe I can. So we'll go down into language images and illustrations. And then here's beginning Tlingit images. You want to make your own flashcards, you want to do that kind of, go for it. You don't have to credit me for anything. You could just make stuff. If you're making it to teach and to use and to learn, go for it. I try to make stuff pretty open in terms of being able to find it, being able to use it. If you go back to this Tlingit curriculum folder, and you could just browse through here. There's lots of stuff. The idea is like there's this big Google folder, there's this blog, and the blog links to things in the Google folder. There are still broken links on the blog. So if you find any, let me know and I'll try and fix them. But if you go down to texts, so this is where you could find pretty much everything that's been printed that has to do with the Tlingit language. I would check out the Downhauer stuff, Crippen. Then there's the Nyman stuff is incredible. If you're interested in stories, here's where I keep all my stuff. Going back to Tlingit curriculum, you go down to Shkashnik. And here's one where you could sort of dig around. Like, so here's the Battle of Sitka, Raven in His Nose. But if you found stuff like here's Hashuka. So that's a book created by Nora Marks Downhauer and Richard Downhauer. And in here there's a PDF of one of the stories, and then here's the audio for that same story. So you can listen to it, Clutine, Amy Marvin telling the Glacier Bay story, and then you can read it at the same time. That kind of stuff is very useful, especially in terms of really listening to how a speaker says those things. And then you could do some stuff like you can play it, pause it, and then you could read what they just said and try to mimic them as closely as you can. And then you can after you've read it, then you could download the audio and just listen to it. Walk around and listen to it. You already know the translation, so your brain will be doing a lot of that work to put the pieces together for you. These days, you do have to surround yourself with the language a lot. So resources and curriculum are kind of similar. If you're trying to put a keyboard onto your computer, there's some stuff for that. If you want some posters, there's some stuff for that. So that's one thing to think about. Then I want to show you folks, this is the YouTube channel that I set up for Lingít. So there's these playlists. So here's Lingít elders. You just want to listen to some elders talk. Quite a few of these have subtitles, but most of them don't. There's a conversations piece. This will eventually be migrated over. This is the work of Daax, Alice Taff, and it's subtitled Conversations with Elders. There's probably about 90 or so conversations. Beginning Lingít, intermediate Lingít, Lingít oral literature, Lingít linguistics. And then you could see sort of the most up-to-date ones usually pop up right here. Then you can see the ones that have been watched kind of the most. Then, let's see, I think there was one other thing. Okay, let's look at one more thing. So if you go to our MOOC, and then you go down to resources for the class, and there's a few other places you can link to this. There is this Verb Database. I want to talk about this for a little bit. So we're going to talk about a Lingít verb and what it is and how it works. But one of the important starting points is usually a whole bunch of stuff at the front, and then there's a verb root, and that root contains the meaning. So all of these, all the text in blue is a verb root. This little number means that it's a homonym. There's another one. This ah is different than this ah is different than this ah. It's just saying there's 3 different ones. So you got to kind of know which one to look up. The number in parentheses tells you how many verbs are listed under that verb root. So if we go under here, here's 7 different verbs: to grow it, to celebrate, to grow or to flow or to turn on, to grow of a plant, daylight for the day to break, for fish to run or fish migrate. And so basically every one of these yellow lines, these yellow bars, is a different verb. And if you click on that verb, it's going to expand it and show you these different verb modes. So a command, a prohibitive, so do the verb, don't do the verb, doing the verb, not doing the verb, did the verb, didn't do the verb, will do the verb, won't do the verb, let the verb happen, always does the verb every time, hasn't done the verb yet, can't do the verb, would have done the verb, if, when they do the verb, and then does the verb regularly. Those are kind of the main ways that a Lingít verb changes. And if you just look at this verb, so here's what we call the verb theme. So it shows you like the skeleton of the verb. So it's got to have these parts, and then you'll see how much this verb changes. So kanas a, kanais a, kisa echik, kaisa echik, aksa ech, kesh akus ech, akausa a, kesh akawus a, akaguksa a, kesh akaguksa a. Akanaksa a, akanas h, kesh akunas h, kesh ade akunaksa a ye, akunaksa a yin, akanas ani, you aik. So it shows you like this verb goes through a bunch of changes. And as you learn more and more about Lingít, you'll begin to know how to make these changes yourself based on the information that's shown to you right there. Like that's the main part of the information that's coded for you. It's not easy, but there's lots of sort of information that's in there. So for now, you can just sort of click around and you could say stuff. Like if you wanted to say, we'll go down to goot, which is to walk, a single person to walk. And then we'll say, okay, I'm looking for, there's going to the bathroom. That's there's the going poop verb, but we're not looking for that. So we'll go down here and we'll say, so now we could change, you know, there's a bit of a plug-in type of thing that we start to learn. So adenagu is go there, but I could say, I could change the to, I could say neshdenagu, go home. Hundakihiti denagu, go to the store. Shkundenagu, go to school. Agahiti denagu, go to church. You know, so now I can tell people go all over the place. And so as you sort of do this stuff, a starting point is using this database, starting to get familiar with some verbs, because you can do a search as well. Like, so if this is closed and this is closed, like I'm going to push Command F and I'm going to say eat. And this gets me to the eat verb. So now I can open this up. This is to eat an object, and this is just to eat. So we are going to talk a bit about objects and subjects. I know that can get kind of sneaky for some folks, but as we look at this, the order must be object, what the verb is, you know, to what the verb is happening to, subject, who's doing the verb, and then the verb. So there's not very many languages that do it in that order. But so here you would say it, I, eat. Like that would be the order that it goes in. But if we open this up, so now we get the command form for eat it, don't eat it, I am eating it, I'm not eating it. Here's like someone walking along eating, okay. I ate it, I didn't eat it, I will eat it, I won't eat it. So you can look a lot of this stuff up without even knowing the sort of ins and outs of the language. But there is a component here, like you gotta know how to make this underline, it's a sound. So you gotta kind of get the hang of that one. Because if you end up saying like, ha, that you're not saying ha, right? So if you said ha, you know, that's, someone might go, what? You know, but the parts are there. So there's been a lot of work. There are a lot of elders who were behind this work who did wonderful stuff with Carrie to sort of put this together. And so just know that it's there. A couple things to note. If you open this on a smartphone and you keep it open, you shouldn't need the internet. Usually I do pretty good. Like I can look stuff up even like on a plane or something, or if I'm out of service, out at a cabin, I can still use this database on my phone. A computer is usually, but also if you go back to our Lingít MOOC page, this download, you can download the XML file for that database, and then you can open it from just save it on your computer, open it from a web browser, then you don't need the internet. So maybe someday we'll have like an app for it or something. I don't know. Okay. Thoughts or questions? We'll look at a couple of print resources as well. And thanks everyone for keeping up with the chat. I saw lots of questions getting answered in the chat. Okay. So let's take a look at a couple other things here, just things that you should have. And Geesh to the folks who scanned this stuff. yeah, if you have something that you see you don't think that I have, feel free to scan it and send it my way. I do think I have that Ha'an Kawu Kanaktu Sheikh.
I also have the music sheets for the piano music, so folks who learn better through singing, so they could time it.
Awesome. Yeah, I don't think I have that. I think I just have the handbook. So yeah, that'd be wonderful. Because yeah, if you see stuff that I don't have, please send it my way, and then I'll try to make sure it's linked in the curriculum. Or if you can't find something too, I try to keep up with. There's like thousands of things out there. So.
Awesome. I'll send it your way. I'm a researcher, but I'm public health, so I hoard literature like nothing else.
Good enough, Geesh. Yeah, and then yeah, and so I'll make sure that that's, you know, it's either under curriculum or resources. If you go there, it should be under one of those two. And then, but yeah, there's some stuff like a moment of honesty. Some people get mad at me because my philosophy is make everything accessible, make it easy to find. So I've gotten letters from lawyers. I've gotten angry letters from individuals. I've been threatened with plagiarism and other legal language. So far, so good. You know, who knows what's going to happen? But if someone wants to take me to see Judge Judy, I'm ready. I don't want it, but I'm ready because I think Adusa ayi o hayukatangi. Had the chunky sani ayi. Keshkena ka ayich uste. The cut uhan ha ayich sati. Gashi to was a good ejite kakoti. Keshat ushkek. Keshas to idach aya akach hate. So that's just me talking tough, I guess. Lingít, who does it belong to? It belongs to our grandchildren. I don't think any single person should lay claim to it. I don't think anybody should threaten anybody. If you want to use stuff that I make, go ahead. You can make it better.
There's no custards in it.
Oh. And then,
I'm pretty sure you could make this up. Yeah, it says it's for mature kids and immature.
And let's see, what else did I say? Oh, and I'm not stingy. I was taught to not be stingy with stuff, so I just try to share. If people want things, I just try to give it to them. But there is some stuff that you might have to contact me and I'll let you know how to find it. Just because them lawyers be fast. And so, you know, I don't know. If you make stuff for language use, have an open publishing agreement. I don't know how to do it. I'm not a lawyer, but I put in my contract that there always has to be a free version of whatever I make. That way, I don't want anybody to say, you can't have this, you gotta buy it from us. Because, you know, who they? Anyways. Thoughts or questions?
As I recall, there are some ready-made licenses that will just throw whatever you put them on into the public domain.
Yeah. Can I answer that? That's what I'm going to add. Yeah, there's a JPUL license, a general public user license. It has varying aspects that you could tweak in it to make it, you know, less shareable for free, you know, more shareable, but give me credit. There's shareable, but if you're going to make money, kick me some money. Shareable, but don't ever use it to make money off of it. So I've had this discussion with Klink and Haida a few times. I couldn't bring it to their salient attention when I tried. Maybe I'm just not a good enough negotiator, but I just saw that they hired like 5 or 6 other lawyers. So maybe if enough of us ask, we can have them work on this kind of generalized general public user license that we can apply to this language stuff. Because I mean, I'm literally going to go spend a couple grand to get one put on my stuff. And it's just for that purpose. You know, I'm going to create these things. They're pretty creative. They're pretty awesome, I think. And if anybody's going to use them, you know, I just don't want them to be stingy with it. And that's what the JPUL does. So, Geesh.
Okay. And then I saw another question there. There are some biblical texts, and I will try to find them by tomorrow. I know that the book of John is out there, and I know that there's a few other things that are out there. There's several versions of the Lord's Prayer, so yeah, I'll find some.
I have a hard copy of the Book of John, and I don't have it scanned. I have a old hard copy.
Whoa, okay.
So I'll have to figure out how to scan it and share it.
Yeah, we got to get a book scanner in our sort of region as well. This just makes stuff easier to, instead of just going one thing at a time.
Problem with the Book of John is that it's written in the old orthography, and it's kind of hard to read if you're trained in the modern orthography.
Yeah, so like if somebody wants to get some funding and pay some folks to update that orthography, I think that'd be a pretty amazing project, and I think it'd be really useful.
I actually have the audio tapes from Paul Rudolph of the I think it's the New Testament or something, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and that kind of stuff too. If folks have audio, like I can transfer it to digital and then get you the originals back, and then put a copy, because there's also a Tlingit audio file, which is different than the Tlingit curriculum file. And then there's a Tlingit video file. And so, yeah, like there's still a bit more work to do to sort of figure out how the organizational system, because I kind of got to hide some stuff from people who are mad at me or going to be mad at me. But then I also want to make it accessible for everybody. So it's a trick. And then, yeah, the Raven book is coming out, which is a whole collection of Raven stories. There's also Ichtsak stories, which aren't for everybody, but they're out there as well, which is the medicine people and how they became medicine people. And those are pretty important stories in Tlingit. So let's take a look at the Tlingit verb dictionary, just so you folks know about it. So this is the Tlingit verb dictionary. An incredibly useful resource. This was done in 1973. There's not very many print versions. If you ever see one around, just grab it. And, you know, I've got a couple of them. I remember Sea Alaska Heritage Institute just like got rid of boxes of them a few years ago. So we just kept them in the classroom, and people just came and got them. So you can get them sometimes on like Amazon and eBay for hundreds of dollars, which is kind of silly. It's out of print, and it's probably not going to have another run, just because there's some things that are being updated, which we'll talk about. But basically, this has a number of different sections. So there's a preface to it, and then there's an appendix, and it's got these grammar sketches, what I think is really useful and wonderful. So if you're interested in how the Tlingit grammar works, like read those. It's a little different in terms of how we approach it these days. Some of the terms have changed. Some of the ways we document some things have changed. But definitely check it out. Let me open the chat so I try not to miss anything. And then, so let's just get into the verb part. So the main section of here is English to Tlingit. So these are all alphabetical. So if we go, sorry if that makes anybody dizzy scrolling so fast, but you go through and you see abandon, abate, abstain. So you would just look up what the word is in English. And this has been scanned and then using text recognition software, which isn't perfect because you can't search like chut. You can't search for that in here. You could kind of look up chut. But if you go down here and then you see eat. So this does not show you whether there's an object or a subject. It kind of does, but you got to dig for that information. So right now this would go O-S-L-root marker eat. Like that's how we would document it these days. And then in parentheses, we would also show 0 act verb, right? And we'll talk about that stuff, what all of that means. But this does show you, and so you could see a perfective. So this is the verb has indeed happened. Here's another perfective. My wife deserted me or abandoned me or threw me away, however you want to look at that. So this has sample sentences in it, which are really interesting. It does include, if you want to read through the sample sentences, you'll find one that says, they're going to throw you into the furnace. I'm not sure the history of that particular sentence. There's some pretty good ones in here. And then the second section on here is clink it to English. So if you found a verb and you wanted to look it up, so you can expand the table of contents. On my computer, it's pretty small, but I could go down to the TL apostrophe and I could look and I could go find this eat, to abandon, desert, leave, throw away, dispose of. So this particular verb, if you look at these ones that are underlined, that's telling you, if you look it up in English, you will find examples of that verb, right? So if I found this verb root and I just wanted to go look up throw away, I go back to the English, go to the T's, scroll down, there's think, thirsty, thread, throw. Here's a preview for those of you who are new to Lingít. Things like carrying, throwing, breaking. There's about 10 ways to do it, depending on how you're doing the thing. Are you throwing a single thing? Does it scatter? Is it water? So Lingít loves to have categories. Then we go down and we get throw away, and then we get do Daax outlet. He threw away all the rubbish from his house. This is also the 1970s, so they're almost always translated as he or him, even though there is no gender in the pronouns. These days we would translate these as, or I would, as a singular they. Isaiah.
Technically, as far as I can tell, in the 1970s, he was the commonly accepted gender-neutral pronoun.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that was just the way that things, that's the way you would translate those things, is the default would be he. And then you get eat. I've already thrown it away. Those of you who've been studying Lingít for a while, you'll see that this is a motion verb, not an act verb, even though I said act earlier. And anybody want to tell me how we know that? It's a nice quiz for our advanced and intermediate students. Let me zoom in. If I look at these two sample sentences, how could I tell that that's a motion verb?
Is it that dock part of it? Away from?
Yes. So when you put dock in front of it, it changes to this a zero conjugation because dock is a zero type motion. This one is a na conjugation, and you, because these are both perfectives, but this one is short and high, this one is long and low. So if I was going to say throw it outside, I could say dock it. But if I wanted to say throw it away, I might say nalkid. So just those of you who are kind of newer to Lingít, a Lingít verb is going to have about 4 or 5 different things that you just got to memorize. Oh, it's one of these. It's like it's just got to put it into these categories. Then eventually you'll learn how to change that verb based on that sort of information. Okay. It's a wonderful text. It's amazing. Between that and the Verb Database, you've got a lot of ground covered. Starting quite a few years ago, I started a Lingít dictionary based on ideas I got from Geesh, James Crippen, which was to include a lot more cultural information. So if you look up icht or you look up kuich, it's going to tell you a bunch of information. Because I think some words just need to be explained. They just need to be explained a little bit. This dictionary has both everything that's not verbs and then verbs. The goal is to eventually have everything from that yellow verb dictionary put into this dictionary. And then everything that's in Jeff Lear's dictionaries into this dictionary. And it's a lot. There's plenty of mistakes in here, as some people would be happy to tell you. But I was really happy that I got to talk to Jillian Story and Constance Nash, who did the yellow dictionary. And I asked them, I said, are you guys okay if I take that stuff and I put it into a new dictionary? And they said, yeah, do whatever you want. It's your guys' language. Do whatever you guys want to it. That's not the thing that everybody has said to me, but those two said it, and I really appreciate it. So this one, and both the verb dictionary and this one, you could do a text search. So you could go into that verb dictionary and you could look up throw, and it'll come up, and swim, and it'll come up with a whole bunch of things. So these are important resources to have. You should have them on your devices. I've got them on my phone, on my tablet, on my computer, so that wherever I'm at, I can look them. The kid just crawled by. I should figure out what's going on. And then the nice thing is, and there's printed versions as well. So have the printed versions around, and then have the other versions as well, because you might be out there on the land, and you might think, what is the word for this thing? And then you could look it up right there. Okay, thoughts or questions in the last 3 minutes here?
That book, Hashishka Hassani, and every time I'm out like on a boat or out hunting or out doing anything, I have it there on my phone so I can look it up and see where these places are, because I don't know them all, but it's like right at my fingertips. So even if I don't have service, I can look it up and I know where it's at. Like I know where I'm at and I know where I'm looking. It's big help.
I think that's one of the good things, in our classes this last year, we talked about how can we as, language learners, Yukatangi, how can we add to the work that's already out there? And like even that with, thinking Ani, just being able to gather other names that aren't there and being able to, I know Hune has another website where we can actually put information in, but just be cognizant that part of our work of learning is also learning, understanding what still needs to be done and helping to pitch in.
Yeah, well, and yeah, if you go to clinkitlanguage.com under resources, beginning materials, if you scroll down, you'll see a document called place names, which is scanned from the place names book, by Tom Thornton, and many others, many elders that he worked with. And it's just the names. It's not the whole book. It's just those lists of names. And same thing, you can, if you're going by point retreat, you can enter retreat and it'll pop up. And that way, because part of our work is going to be putting those names back on the land by using them and by lobbying and doing things to make those names official. But I think those are going to be really important steps. A friend of mine in Hawaii just showed me they got in Hawaii, like most of the street names and nearly every community has Hawaiian names. But I guess they've recently started putting numbers on the street signs for tourists. So you could say, take me to street 3175 instead of saying like Ali'i Drive or something like that. I'm very much against that idea. It's like, don't want to learn, don't want to use it, don't come. And so that's kind of my philosophy here as well. It's like, let's put the names back on the land and people can learn how to say Shkagwe instead of Skagway. I saw your hand is up.
I just was curious, So listening to you speak, I'm assuming that you have been studying for like ever. How long should some of us, like what is the time commitment that I should be giving to this if I really want to dedicate myself? Because I've never learned a second language fully. I learned some Iñupiaq when I was growing up, but it was all the bad words that you weren't supposed to learn. And but like truly learning a second language, I've never done that. So I don't know. I know coming to class twice a week isn't enough. So what do we do? How do we do this? Because I want to learn.
Yeah, people learn at different levels. I think if you could do an hour or two every single day, that's a really good step. And then especially if you could find people to talk to, I think that's probably the missing element for a lot of people is you just sort of come and learn some stuff and then leave, and then come and learn some stuff and then leave. But you got to find ways to use that stuff so that your brain could find all the gaps. Because if you're using it, you're saying, oh yeah, I realized I didn't know how to say, and then I went to this thing, right? So tying things together is pretty important, and people need to do that. But I've seen people who could pretty much speak in a year, but it's more common that it takes 2 or 3 years before you really start going. We've sort of toyed around with this idea. I don't think we're quite there yet, but where we would take people and they would just live in the language for 6 hours a day for a year. And I think they'd be speaking at a really high level after 1 year. But that means it takes a little bit of redefinition in your life, right? So if you don't speak Tlingit now, then you have to carve out that time and make those connections with other people. And then you have to sort of push yourself continually beyond your comfort level. But then 2 or 3 years from now, you're going to find that you're getting conversational, and that you're able to, learning a language is a really interesting thing because you just struggle, and all of a sudden someone says something and you just understand them. Like, oh yeah. And then for some people, the speaking part takes a little bit longer, but I do think if you can hit it 1 or 2 hours every single day, that really goes a long ways. But that English side of your brain, I think, is always going to be saying, take a break, just relax, we're okay. But that's that colonial side of the brain, I think, which is just sort of saying, let it go. Yéil?
In our informal class based in Seattle, we started with just Elizabeth Peratrovich Day. We would fast from English and vow to speak nothing but Tlingit for that day. It was to various degrees successful, but we wanted to carry it on more. So now we're doing it the 15th of every month. And then we come together and talk about our experiences, which has been varied from really bad experiences to wonderful experiences. So that it's very challenging.
Oh, okay. It's Geesh. Yeah, and sometimes you gotta remove that safety net of English, which is a challenge. But maybe tomorrow when we start class, we'll look at this Yéil story, and then we'll just sort of have a conversation about it. We'll try and stay in Tlingit for the first 10 to 15 minutes. So those of you who speak Tlingit, just be prepared to converse a little bit so that we can get into the deep waters. And then, yeah, there is a Zoom, like an open Zoom link that learners can use anytime they want to gather. The idea was, I'll show you folks the base camp, and I'll share the link with you folks tomorrow. The idea is that the base camp is sort of like where people communicate to say, hey, anybody want to have coffee and speak Tlingit tomorrow at 4 p.m. or whatever the thing is, and then others can say, yeah, I'll be there. And then it's sort of, because these things have to sustain themselves and they have to be group initiated and sort of things like that. But whether it's studying, conversing, like you have to push yourself to be around it, because a big difference between Tlingit and some other languages is you can't just, you could go to France and be surrounded by it, you know, and so same with lots of other places. You could be surrounded by the language, and for Tlingit, that really does not exist yet.
So I had a question regarding fluency. You had mentioned that there's people that have picked it up really quickly. And, you know, I have some personal observations, but I would like kind of your input. And I say this with the least amount of negativity as I possibly can, you know. I'm really trying to be positive and point towards what I believe is the strength of some of those people that speak. But of all the people that picked it up really quick, did they somehow engage with the language at a level where it became part of their livelihood? Like it became kind of something that they did as a part of their work? Because what I've noticed is the people that pick it up the fastest, they've got this 8-hour period where they get to spend in the language and they get paid for it. So they don't have to worry about going home and doing something else. And I say that, you know, I know the area of wilderness pretty well, but I spend a lot of time out there. You know, I don't get paid for it money, but I get paid for in food and, you know, resources and stuff. So, you know, maybe, you know, there's a way that we can create more spaces for people to, you know, maybe even have some side thing going on where they can engage. You know, money runs the world. Unfortunately, we can transform that, but we have to engage with it first to make that transformation. So anyway, my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be great. The Hayuk Atangi Day program through Silaska Heritage Institute pays people to be full-time language learners, and then they expect you to just not do anything else, right? And so, and then there's other programs that are like that with other languages. Mohawk has a program, you go and you live in the language all day, and you're not allowed to do other stuff, and they can create speakers in a year. And I think Shaqaish has some thoughts to share about his path to fluency. So he got there really fast. Shaqaish.
Well, he's waiting to come in. I think there's some things that we talked about sharing, which was like, you know, many people every night listen to like the YouTubes, or they download stories and they take walks with them, or, you know, try to do as many things to put you in the space. Because I find, you know, for example, me, I'm older individual now. My learning isn't as sharp as it used to be. And, you know, like I have notes all over my house, like trying to ask myself questions, you know, like, see you, Daku Sitan, you know, I mean, every day I'm asking myself questions. But we have to it's really hard if you don't force yourself to be in places and develop the confidence enough to talk to your friends who you know are more fluent. You know, I'm so grateful that in the classes, there's so many younger people who can pick up quicker that are willing to like befriend me, you know? So I think that's, I'm really appreciative of that.
Okay. Geesh. We might have to pick this conversation up tomorrow. So maybe tomorrow we'll start with the Yéil Kakanata. We'll talk about it a little bit. If anybody was having microphone problems, we'll try and resolve those by tomorrow. But then let's talk some learning strategies, and then we'll take a look at this Tlingit verb I kept saying we were going to take a look at. Yeah, the children of the Taku, they've got a really interesting approach as well. And they just did something like a 9 or like a 2-week hiking thing where they were just living in the language, and we got to figure out how to carve out those times, you know, because that did help me. Was the Sea Alaska just brought a group to Glacier Bay, and we just lived there for 10 days in the language. And for me, when I decided to try and continue to talk to the old people in Tlingit, like that's what pushed me. Was I said, I want them to understand me, and I want to understand what they say, and I'm not going to get discouraged and give up. And I want to be able to talk to them and say, I really wanted them to say it's like talking to old people. Like that's what I wanted them to feel like. And so, but it also meant making lots of mistakes and saying a bunch of stuff and just, you know, nobody can understand what I was trying to say, and just getting past that though, but also finding people who would teach me what I was doing incorrectly instead of people who would just sort of laugh or just shut it down. So that's how this one's going to wrap up this evening. There's Geesh. I'll post the recording tonight, and then we'll pick it up tomorrow.
Sia kwasatin ganach Geesh.
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 Kwasatini.
Geesh. Sia kwasatin.
Ja, genug to je gosatin, grilltjes.
Yay, gachtusi.
Sheesh.
Thank you.